The haunting of the Westminster Hotel is one of the most weird and intricate, and at the same time, saddening horror story that I have heard about. It was 1920, and as the First World War came to an end and a lot of rich people were sending their children to prime colleges to get them the best education, and the elites, even though they had the upper hand during the war, and even after it while everyone else suffered. They were much more sadistic and entitled than everyone else, even though they had everything they could. During the period of 1920 and 1924, the Westminster Hostel faced the horrible bullying case of one Jack Delphi. He was a student, a new student that had recently moved all the way from France. He was raised by a single mother, and much of her influence was rubbed on Jack, and her mother wanted Jack to have a different, rather much manlier experience. So she transferred her to the Westminster Hotel, the hotel that was known for its rigorous and manlier training schedules. It was a place to turn the boys into men, and Jack's mother thought it was the positive change that her boy probably needed, and wrongfully, she came to regret her decision. The first week for Jack was easy settling, and it seemed as if he would be easy to mingle in with the boys, as everyone seemed to be of same societal stature, so there were no complexes to worry about. As Jack settled in, he found his friendship with Thomas quite useful, and they got very close during their stay in the hotel. And then one night when Jack and Thomas were alone in the hostel, they both opened up their sexuality and kissed. The boys spent the night together, and Jack was happy that he met Thomas, and they became friends and were able to share their feelings and thoughts. And then next day, Jack woke up to his worst day. He saw that Thomas was gone. Moreover, everyone in the hostel was eyeing him and laughing. He had no idea as to what was going on until one of the most senior boys came in, held him by his throat, and threatened his life, and asked him if he was a little faggot boy. At first, Jack ignored it, but then he said that Thomas had told them everything, that Jack tried to kiss him. Thomas, trying to save himself from any doubts, threw Jack under the bus. Jack refused to admit the accusations. It wasn't until the afternoon assembly when Jack was confronted by the bullies, who wanted him to admit he was gay, but he didn't, so they beat him instead and went away. Come the night, everyone surrounded his bed, and as he did, the biggest bully of them all came closer to him and asked if he was gay, and that if he admits it, he will be left with. So he did it, and he admitted that he was. Everybody just went away as the bully eyed everyone else to leave him alone. It was around 2 in the night when Jack got up to visit the bathroom. There, he was confronted by Dan, the biggest bully in the school. He grabbed Jack by the throat and pinned him to the wall while Andrew, another bully, pushed him to the bathroom floor as they muffled his voice with a piece of cloth, and they took turns violating Jack, as Jack was horrified and in tears. They left as soon as they were done, and Jack just stood there in shock and in pain. Next morning, when everyone woke up, they found Jack hanging to the fan above his bed. It was an apparent suicide, and it was concluded that the reason for suicide was homosexuality, and Thomas was blamed for it. The hostel went on going without a conscience, and it kept it relevant through all the evil that it was harboring. It was clear that Jack was a victim, but seeing that homosexuality was perceived a crime back then, no one really cared enough. And about a month later is when the haunting in the Westminster Hotel started, when a student claimed that they seen Jack. The certainty to the claims were confirmed when Thomas, Andrew, and Dan were brutally killed in bizarre accidents. Some say that it was just a crazy coincidence, while some claim that it was in fact Jack taking revenge from people who were responsible for his death.
Back when I was a sophomore in college, I had this weird, uber-shifty Armenian roommate called Tigran. He gave off the strongest serial killer vibes ever. He was a weird loner type, unhealthy obsession with all things lewd, kept a knife collection for some reason. Like I was considering asking for a dorm transfer almost as soon as I met the guy. But then I move in, a few months go by, and he just sort of keeps to himself. So, in the end, it wasn't all that bad, and I didn't seek the transfer. Then one night, I just so happened to be watching the evening news when I catch a story about a series of attacks targeting girls on campus. Obviously, with it being so close to home, it piques my interest and I start paying attention. That's when they show a sketch artist's drawings of the suspected attacker, and the guy they show on screen looks almost exactly like Tigran. Same dark hair and eyes, same sloping brow and wide features. I mean, it was like a Snapchat filter sketch rendering of his face, almost identical. Immediately, I'm like, no way. He can't actually be the one. Because him being a serial killer was just a running joke. He couldn't actually have been one. But then again, he did stay late at the library most nights, and if he wasn't at the library, he was night jogging, as he put it. I never heard of anyone running in the dark before in my life, so as you can imagine, I get this horrible twinge of fear in my gut that Tigran is actually the one attacking these girls. Only, and I know this might sound dumb, but I didn't want to just pick up the phone and call 911 on the guy just because he was a night owl who looked similar to a sketch. I mean, what if it turned out to be a totally different dude, and I end up ruining Tigran's academic year by embroiling him in some kind of nightmare false accusation? So, I decided to wait it out. Keep a close eye on him, and if he carried on with his sketchy nocturnal pursuits, or if there was another attack, then I'd call the campus cops tip line and leave an anonymous message. About a week goes by. It's like coming up on 10 p.m. and Tigran gets home late from wherever he's been. I casually drop a little question in there like, how's it been? Been busy? Where'd you just get back from? Then right as he's about to answer, I notice all these red marks up and down his arm. I feign a bathroom visit to get a little look at them, and I can clearly see what look like scratches up and down his forearms. I'm in the bathroom like, oh God, he's got those scratches from a victim, classic defense wounds, and I bet I'll hear about it tomorrow on the news. Then when I'm casually like, oh, whoa, buddy, those scratches look nasty, how'd you get them? He replies that he just started taking MMA lessons. MMA lessons? Not jujitsu, or strike training, or BJJ, just a super vague excuse of MMA lessons. After that, I'm almost 100% convinced it's him attacking girls around campus. Only I can't risk telling on him and him not catching any charges, as I got it in my head that he'd know it was me or something. So, I hatched the dumbest plan ever to follow him at night and catch him in the act. I really did. That way, in my mind at least, I could potentially catch him red-handed, maybe stop it and tackle him, and basically sit on the guy until the cops showed up, having saved the day with zero repercussions from a psychopath serial killer roommate. Then maybe 2 or 3 nights later, I hear Tigran grabbing his keys in preparation to leave. I say, where you headed to, bud? And he replies, just going running. I'll be back late. I just shrug it off, barely looking up from playing Xbox, but when he shuts the door, I sprint into action, throwing on khakis, boots, hoodie, the works, before grabbing my phone for the purposes of gathering evidence. As soon as I see that Tigran, despite being dressed for athletics, is actually just walking to wherever he's going, I'm convinced I'm about to maybe save a life, at least stop a girl from being hideously violated in a way she might never truly recover from. I mean, why else would that guy lie about jogging at night? It was kind of like a spy movie for a while in my mind. Me tailing Tigran, staying far enough away that he wouldn't suspect anything, but also working my butt off to make sure I didn't just lose track of him. We ended up walking way off campus through a residential area and towards a large public park. And as we get closer and closer to this big clump of bushes, Tigran takes something out of his pocket and slides it over his head. A ski mask. I hadn't been all that scared until I saw that, and something about seeing him slipping on the mask of his predatory alter ego. God, that about scared the living crap out of me. It was like the closest I'll ever come to seeing a legit werewolf transformation or something, actually witnessing a monster being born, or however you want to phrase it. Then, with me slightly out of sight, I watched Tigran walk into the clump of bushes. It had to be his ambush spot of choice, right? the place he'd wait and watch for potential victims to come along before pouncing on them. That had to be enough. I'd creep into the bushes, rip off his ski mask, all while recording a video so I can get definitive proof that it's him committing the acts. So, I start slowly creeping towards the bushes through the darkness when I decide what I'm doing is a really, really bad idea. If Tigran really is some violent attacker, maybe me cornering him in a bush isn't the smartest move. So I decide to call the cops before I make my move, and that way, I won't be waiting too long for them to show up when I finally do tackle him. So I call, tell them the situation, and although the dispatcher tells me not to approach the suspect, I'm so nervous about the prospect of Tigran getting away and then forced to carry on living with him that I think, screw it, I'm gonna nail this guy. I wasn't about to let him get away once he saw flashing lights or something. Then right as I have that exact thought, I start hearing the sound of hushed voices and grunting coming from the bushes where Tigran was hiding. He had someone. Somehow in that time it had taken me to make the 911 call, I had to pull back a little so no one would spot my cell phone light or hear my voice. He had managed to drag someone into the bushes, and he had already started an attack. At that, I launched into action, rushing towards the bushes and shouting something like, "Hey, leave her alone." It's dark, but since I'm recording, my phone flashlight is lighting up everything I'm pointing at. So, as I push my way into this little clearing, I see not one, but two guys scatter before turning to face me. My adrenaline goes into overdrive at that moment. I had no idea that I'd be outnumbered and that Tigran had been working as part of a team. So my first thought is like, oh God, I knew this was a bad idea. But still, both guys seem severely caught off guard, and as I start recording faces and reaching for Tigran's ski mask, the other, who wasn't wearing a mask, bolts out of the bushes and flees the scene. Tigran can't go anywhere though. His pants are by his ankles, and as he reaches for them, I shoved him to the floor and told him to stay put. And that's about the time I start to notice the distinct lack of any female victim. I'm shining my light around and I'm on the verge of being like, hello, where's the victim? When the thought hits me like a ton of bricks. There was no female victim, and there never was a victim at all. The only people who had been in that bush were Tigran and his male companion. He hadn't been going out to attack girls. He'd been going out for secret meetups with dudes he's been meeting on Grindr. Who knows why the guy in the sketch looked so much like him? Maybe someone had spotted him on his way to or from one of his meetings, then passed his description on to the cops. Either way, not only did they never find the guy who was actually to blame, but Tigran obviously wasn't the one attacking these girls. I mean, he wasn't even into girls. I had to convince the dispatcher that the perpetrators I thought I had caught had gotten away, in which during that time, Tigran did have time to separate himself from that situation, probably went back to the dorm. And without a victim, by the time police showed up, they chalked it up to me just being an overly concerned citizen. They took my muddied up statement and annoyedly told me to be safe and get on with my evening. I ended up apologizing profusely to Tigran, who actually thought I was just some homophobe at first. But once I showed him the composite sketch and explained my hunch, he was willing to forgive me on the condition that I keep his secret. You see, Tigran wasn't just ethnically Armenian. He was actually born there, and since his family were hardcore religious, they wouldn't approve of his lifestyle at all, hence why he kept it under wraps. We were all square, but living with him was still pretty awkward, and it wasn't like we became the best of friends afterward. But still, definitely one of the scariest things I've experienced with a college roommate. And from now on, I'll just mind my own business.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all this support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
I'd gone the first 22 years of life without having any near-death experiences and hoped to make it through the rest the same way. Unfortunately, a month ago, I was put in such a terrifying position, I was afraid my life was about to end. The gist of the story is that I was the victim of mistaken identity. From what I've been able to gather in the interim, a former female employee was having a tryst with a fellow male employee, and her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend, I'm still not sure, did not approve of the relationship. I want to start by saying that I never worked with or even knew the woman in question. Being a gay man, she wouldn't have been my type if I had. A couple of people that were around when she was told me that she and the man she was sleeping with had been fired a good 6 months prior to my employment. The unlucky coincidence appears to be that he and I shared the same first name and physical description. This had to have been why I was confused with him. A quiet evening in July, I was working, waiting tables, and just before 7:30, I got a single male sat in my section. He didn't look especially mean upon first sight, but he was a rather large man. I'm 5'11", and this man towered over me. Nothing was said at first. I took his drink order, and when I returned with it, he confronted me about the affair. "So you're the loser that's banging my girl?" I asked him to repeat what he'd said, and only got more hostility in return. "You heard me, boy. Ginger told me about your affair last night." His demeanor terrified me. I knew if he wanted, he could easily destroy me. Fighting had never been my forte, and a guy his size would have no trouble laying me out. I did my best to assure him I didn't know his girlfriend, but this only made him angrier. "Listen, you can deny it all you want, but she told me your name and what you look like. Saying you don't know her is just making me more mad." I could see the hate burning in his eyes. He spoke with gritted teeth, and spittle was beginning to come out of the corners of his mouth. My shaking had to have been obvious to him. I was on the verge of running away, but I didn't want to come off as any bigger a coward than I already was. "I'm sorry, sir. I in no way want to make you angry, but I swear that I've never met a girl named Ginger in my entire life. If she worked here, it must have been before I started. I literally only worked here for a few months. Any relationship I had ever had hasn't even included a female, if you get my meaning." It took a moment, but he caught on, and his scowl morphed into a smug grin in seconds. Telling a complete stranger about my preferences wasn't a discussion I wanted to have. However, I was out of ideas and decided on the Hail Mary. "You look like one of those deviants, but it's going to take a lot more to convince me than that." Playing that card must have been a bad idea. Although his voice had lowered slightly, he was balling his hands into fists, and this made my trembling worse. "Why don't you man up and admit you were balling my girl? You got a whooping coming either way. If you admit it, I might be a bit easier on you." It was as if he hadn't heard anything I'd said since he first accused me. The whole time this had been going on, I hadn't been aware of what else was going on around me. Someone in the restaurant, perhaps a patron, had notified my manager what was happening at this table. He came around just as the man had threatened to assault me and interrupted the conversation. "Excuse me, sir. I just overheard your threat toward my employee, and that is something I cannot allow customers to do. I'd like you to leave immediately, or I'll be forced to call the police." "You can call whoever you want. I don't care. I'm just here to tell this little wimp I'm going to give him a stomping for banging my Ginger." The manager's threat didn't seem to make any difference to the man. He was still just as mad before and wasn't showing any signs of leaving. "Sir, if you mean Ginger, the girl who left here more than 6 months ago, I can almost guarantee you that this young man never had any interactions with her. Now, there was another young man with the same name as him that I was forced to fire the same time as Ginger. I inform every employee at the time they are hired that relationships between employees are forbidden, especially when one of those employees are management. A rumor that they were violating this policy reached me, and when asked about it, they both confirmed it. Because of this, they were both terminated that same day. This young man is a new employee, and to my knowledge does not know either of these two. Maybe you should go back to Ginger and ask her to be more specific about the situation. Like I said, I can't have people coming into my restaurant and threatening my employees." You heard the real story, so now you can leave. And please do so now. The entire time my manager spoke, he never raised his voice except for the end. Even then, he kept his composure. I think because of this, the man finally started to believe what I had told him. He stood up at the table, and he must have been at least 6'5". One more shudder of fear shot through me when I realized how massive he was. Okay, mister. I'm gonna go and have a talking to Ginger again. And if I find out you lied to me, I'm coming back and putting both of you down. The man then turned for the exit. I'd recommend you not do that, sir. My manager hit him with one more parting shot as he left, but the giant ignored it. Once he was gone, I could finally breathe again. After I took a few minutes to calm myself, I returned to work. That evening, and every shift I've worked since, our manager has made sure to walk with me to my car when I get off. He's had a permit to carry a handgun for some time, so this safety measure does make me feel secure. I don't think he's really worried about himself. Since we have our own parking area in the back of the building, not many other people come back there. I'm not even sure many other people know about it. I, nor anyone else, have seen the man since that night, but will probably continue with the escorts for the foreseeable future. I pray each day I leave for work that I won't see that monster ever again. If he does return, I'll update my post. However, I'm pretty sure if he was going to, he would have by now. Let's hope I'm right. I can't speak for the grinder experience in Western communities, but I can speak for one particular grinder experience from here in India. India can be quite a progressive country in some ways, and quite an intolerant country in others. For example, we have the Hijra here, which are like Indian transgender or third gender people who have been accepted for thousands of years. They are even part of the Hindu religion, and Aravanis, as they are sometimes called, take part in a festival in which they marry the Hindu god Aravan, and then mourn his death by ritual sacrifice. But like I said, India can be very homophobic too, and although same-gender partners were technically recognized in 2018, same-gender marriages still aren't legal, and almost a quarter of the Indian people are strongly against it. So as you can imagine, dating apps can be an absolute blessing when it comes to finding partners, or in my case, they can be an absolute curse. I matched with one guy, and he was really, really cute, so immediately I shared a picture of myself asking him if he wanted to meet up. I'm a little bit older than some of the cuter guys in my area, and I fairly rarely get a reply from them. But when this guy actually messaged back, I got so very excited, and we quickly arranged for him to visit my apartment. When he tells me he's on his way, he asks to see a few more pictures of me so he can know what he's looking forward to. Of course, I show him, and because I'm so very excited to meet him, I don't really think anything of him asking me to see me in my work clothes. He said he liked a man in a shirt and tie, and since I worked in an office here in Mumbai, I had plenty of professional and not-so-professional shots on hand. His questions continued to get quite personal, asking where I worked, but when I confronted him on it and asked why he seemed to be interrogating me, he replied that it was for his own safety. He'd been with some rough guys in the past, and he was worried something might happen to him. I thought that was just the sweetest thing. So after assuring him that my intentions were nothing but good, I answered every question he had of me. About an hour later, he shows up, and he looks even better than his pictures. I can't believe how lucky I am. He looks fantastic, and he seems to really actually like me. We had drinks, chatted about this and that, and after an awkward first kiss, we fell into bed together. It was honestly one of the most magical nights of my life. I never had much luck finding partners. I'm definitely not the most handsome desi gay guy out there, so such a wonderfully romantic evening was just a dream come true for me. When it was over, we cuddled for a while, and I was so happy to hear that he wouldn't mind meeting me again sometime. Then he got up, went to the bathroom for a drink of water, and began to put his clothes on again. It was quite late at that point, so I figured he just needed to leave because of work in the morning or something. and just as I'm about to give him a kiss goodbye, he looks me dead in the eyes and says, 30,000 rupees. I thought he was joking. I really did. And when he held out his hand to me, I laughed a little. But the look on his face was deadly serious. He seemed to get offended when I laughed at what turned out to be a very serious demand. The thing that really got to me, though, was how rehearsed his routine was. As soon as I showed any sign that I wasn't willing to give him the money, he turned nasty, started clapping his hands and really shouting about how, "Oh, you're not going to pay me for this? We just had it. Do your neighbors know that you're gay?" I think he must have pegged me as a shy, half-out gay guy from the get-go. He must have known I lived in a nice place where my neighbors or parents wouldn't have approved of my lifestyle. I begged him to be quiet as he took his phone out and showed me what was obviously an addition to his profile, a little code word we have for male escorts that, well, I won't reveal here for obvious reasons, but I swear to you, it wasn't there when we talked, and to my horror, I was being rather effectively blackmailed. And for 30,000 rupees too, that's about $400, a lot for me, and I could be considered to be quite well off here for my white-collar job. So much that there's no way I had all that cash on me, so he just took what was in my wallet, then demanded I take him to a cash machine. My last line of defense was telling him that I just didn't have the money in my account. But he recognized the lie instantly and raised his voice again, calling me expletives and calling me cheap. At this point, my neighbors are actually looking out of the windows because he's raising his voice on the walkway outside my apartment. I have to beg with him with tears forming my eyes. Please don't show them. They don't know. They don't know. He smiled such a sick smile after that, knowing that he had me by the balls, and all I could do was roll over and let it all happen. We had to go to 2 different ATMs, his insistence, not mine, to withdraw the full amount. And that's when he basically rubbed salt in the wounds by calling some of his friends on his phone to gloat about how he's got a big one tonight. And I'm not talking about his ling. At the start of the night, I was so excited, and at its peak, I thought I'd found true love. But then there I was, feeling stupid, scared, and utterly humiliated, being robbed blind by a soulless, heartless predator. When we were finished getting the money, he told me to drop him off somewhere, and he even had the cheek to thank me for a good night. When I drove back home, I actually thought about taking my own life. The feelings were just too much for me, and I wasn't sure if I could stand to feel them any longer. But instead, I just got drunk and cried until I fell asleep. Perhaps the worst thing is that my neighbors suspect something now. I know they look at me different, and they're not nearly as friendly as they used to be. I think I might move somewhere else soon, maybe look for a new job too, because I really cry for help inside. I really don't deserve this, and I wonder what I did so terrible that it actually happened to me. So please, never share any intimate pictures unless you really trust the person, and make sure to trust them before you invite them over to your place.